In 1945, Japan declared surrender, and the Japanese troops stationed in Korea received instructions to prepare for the return to Japan with important research. The commander ordered the destruction of all base data, and furthermore, all individuals who had died in human experiments were gathered and burned together. The surviving prisoners were also executed without exception. Human lives were considered worthless in their eyes. These innocent civilians perished as part of the Japanese military's serum research. They aimed to create a human assimilation. After extensive research and testing, the Japanese military produced a total of 12 serums and 8 living, assimilated individuals. As for what these assimilated individuals are, the director has temporarily left it as a suspense. The leading Japanese person glanced at the iron door, and a terrifying force kept striking it. The thick iron door had a bulge from the impact, indicating that the assimilated individuals were imprisoned inside. The Japanese military didn't want to waste any more time. They ignited a large fire to destroy the base and withdrew. The whole story unfolds from there. Here, I want to clarify in advance that Seoul was actually called Hansung or Kijo during the Japanese colonial period. However, to avoid confusion, we will use the name Seoul. It was the end of March 1945, and Japan had not yet surrendered. Spring arrived unusually early in Seoul that year, and news of the massive explosion in Tokyo spread rapidly, causing a quiet restlessness throughout Korea. In order to maintain order, the military arrested all those involved in secretly printing newspapers, and called for Koreans to join the Imperial Army and worship at Yasukuni Shrine. Although it was ostensibly a call, in reality, it was a forced enlistment of young men. It is said that the darkest hour is just before dawn, and it seems that the Japanese military realized they were on the decline, so they began to torment the people with their final efforts. A pawn shop Kim-ok-dang, its owner Jang Tae-sang fell into the hands of the enemy, and narrowly avoided being labeled as a member of the Independence Army. Speaking of Kim-ok-dang, it is the largest pawn shop in Seoul, but Tae-sang is not a second-generation wealthy person. He is a self-made representative figure. He is a smooth talker, always lingering at various social gatherings. He is known as a golden bachelor. The soldiers outside the door couldn't help but gossip. What exactly did the young master of Kim-ok-dang do? The two of them chatted and discussed, saying that Tae-sang was involved in a complicated relationship with the police officer's wife. After Officer Ishikawa finished punishment and dispersed the crowd, he immediately changed his expression. It turns out Ishikawa had a favor to ask. Tae-sang is known as a jack of all trades, so Ishikawa entrusted him to find the missing geisha, Akiko, and investigate whether she was having an affair. If Tae-sang fails to find her, his assets will be confiscated. Tae-sang returned home with great anxiety. In fact, there have been frequent cases of women going missing in the capital recently, causing great anxiety in both the southern and northern villages. Tae-sang wanted to leave with money, but his real estate holdings were difficult to liquidate, and Ishikawa's men were guarding downstairs. He could only use all his connections to search for clues. Then, Tae-sang instructed his colleague, Park Gun, to arrange a meeting with the young master Juntaek. In all of Seoul, perhaps the only person daring enough to have an affair with Ishikawa's lover is this young master. At this moment, a woman named Chae-ok was hiding downstairs, secretly observing Tae-sang's residence. Chae-ok and her father, Yoon, came to Seoul a few days ago. They wanted to find a Japanese man named Sakamoto. However, they inquired for a long time but had no gain. Instead, they learned about Tae-sang's reputation as a jack of all trades, so they came to investigate. It was approaching evening when Tae-sang finally left his house. He brazenly approached the informant arranged by Ishikawa. He asked the informant to take him to the northern village. Chae-ok, seeing this, quickly rode her motorcycle to follow. As for why Ishikawa valued this lover so much, it was because Akiko was pregnant. Ishikawa thought she had eloped with someone else. Unbeknownst to him, Akiko had been abducted by the Japanese. She, along with other missing women, was kept in a prison cell. Every few days, the Japanese soldiers would take one person away, and lock them in a separate room. On the floor, they would place a plate of chewy rice cakes and plain water. After eating the rice cakes, the women would inevitably drink water. At that moment, the toxins would enter their bodies. The scene shifts to Nawaldarek, the housekeeper at Kim-ok-dang. She followed Tae-sang's instructions to sell valuable collectibles. If they couldn't find Akiko, they would have to abandon the real estate and escape with as much cash as possible. The boss who exchanged money saw that Nawaldarek was in a hurry to ask for money. Unable to hold back, he exclaimed that the rumors turned out to be true. Recently, there have been rumors circulating. Tae-sang suffered a big loss at Ishikawa's place. Unexpectedly, he really has to take the money and run. Upon hearing this, Nawaldarek told the boss to keep his mouth shut. This matter must not be leaked. The boss couldn't help but add another sentence. He said that 2 spies have arrived in Seoul. It is said that there is no person they can't find. If Tae-sang encounters trouble, he can go to those 2 people for help. The spies the boss referred to, most likely are Chae-ok and her father. At this moment, she is following Tae-sang to the northern village. However, Tae-sang has already noticed. In the blink of an eye, he slipped into an alley, and stood behind the woman. But he underestimated Chae-ok's skills. He was countered by her. Naturally, Tae-sang refused to take this loss. He immediately got up and fought back. This time, he was prepared and regained his dignity. Unexpectedly, in the midst of their struggle, Tae-sang accidentally knocked off Chae-ok's hat. Only then did he realize that the person in front of him was a beautiful woman. In the blink of an eye when he was distracted, Chae-ok immediately launched a sneak attack. Both of them defended against each other's vital points. Seeing that she didn't have the intention to kill, he took the lead and put away his weapon. Chae-ok also eased her attitude and asked Tae-sang to find someone. Then she started describing Sakamoto's features. Unexpectedly, the other party was careless and casual. The 2 of them couldn't reach an agreement and ended up parting ways unhappily. Tae-sang turned around and went to meet young Master Juntae in the northern village. Unexpectedly, it turned out that he had a relationship with Akiko. However, that was all before Ishikawa. Young Master Juntae doesn't care about Akiko. He advised Tae-sang to simply bring out his assets to help the patriots and the country. Tae-sang became somewhat angry upon hearing this. He grew up without parents. He has been bullied in this country. National righteousness means nothing to him. Tae-sang only believes in the security that money brings. When he returned home, Nawaldarek had already invited Mr. Yoon and his daughter. Tae-sang was momentarily dumbfounded. After a brief exchange of information between the 2 sides, they eventually agreed to collaborate. Because Tae-sang has a wide network of connections in Japan, it would be convenient to search for the Japanese painter Sakamoto. And Mr. Yoon and his daughter are skilled at finding people in the lower levels. The scene shifts back to the Japanese military side. The subjects during the day have shown some response. The guy with glasses ordered to inject serum into her. Then they sent someone to invite the painter to come and document. This painter is none other than Sakamoto that Chae-ok was looking for. Sakamoto, who had just graduated from Tokyo University of Fine Arts a year ago, came to Seoul Ongseong Hospital to earn some extra remuneration. He arrived at the Ongseong Hospital in Seoul. The Japanese director in charge of this place threw him a book titled Anatomy of the Human Body. He instructed Sakamoto to familiarize himself with the human body, because what he had to paint was humans. The director used Korean prisoners of war for live dissections, and he asked Sakamoto to refine the contents of the anatomy book. Over the past year, he had witnessed the most hideous side of human nature. However, he was still frightened by the scene before him. The creature in the cage couldn't be called human at all, but Sakamoto recognized the necklace she was wearing. This woman, who had transformed into a monster, was highly likely to be Chae-ok's missing mother, who has been missing for many years. The purpose of the father and daughter becoming spies was to find their lost family members. Late at night, to investigate the case of Akiko, Chae-ok infiltrated Ishikawa's mansion. Using her extraordinary skills, she found Maeda Yukiko, the wife of the police officer, secretly handing a letter to the man in the suit outside the window. Without hesitation, Chae-ok followed them. She saw the man in the suit stop in front of a mansion. He bowed respectfully to the person across the street. He even opened the door for the other person. The next day, Mr. Yoon and his daughter arrived at Kimokdang. They spent half a day, and found the rickshaw driver who carried Akiko 7 days ago. He was also the last person to see Akiko. The shopkeeper in the store was very surprised. He had already questioned the brothel's rickshaw drivers thoroughly. Chae-ok stated that the rickshaw driver was not from the brothel. Just think, who hates the other woman the most? Of course, it's the legal wife. So, she followed the man in the suit from last night, and found the rickshaw driver commonly used by Yukiko. The father and daughter used some methods to let the rickshaw drivers tell something, and as a result, they learned that 7 days ago, Yukiko had arranged a meeting with Akiko. The rickshaw driver mentioned that after Akiko left Ishikawa's mansion, she went to Ongseong Hospital, and after Akiko arrived at the hospital, she completely disappeared. The shopkeeper said that it didn't make sense. If it wasn't the identity of the Japanese military or the police, or someone related to the Governor General's office, it would be difficult to enter Ongseong Hospital. How could Akiko, just a Korean geisha, have the ability? Tae-sang suddenly thought of a possibility. What if Yukiko had made arrangements in advance? It seemed that they had to visit Ongseong Hospital. Tae-sang took a stack of cash to seek Jun-taek's help in gaining access. Although Jun-taek is a member of the underground independence army, he does have a respectable background. Tae-sang borrowed his ID card for temporary use. Before long, Mr. Yoon and his daughter arrived. They even changed into the clothes he had prepared. After all, wealthy people shouldn't dress too shabbily, and Chae-ok looked radiant after dressing up. The group successfully infiltrated by using Jun-taek's identity information. Tae-sang and the shopkeeper pretended to be sick at the reception desk, causing a commotion. Their intention was to divert everyone's attention. Meanwhile, Chae-ok took the opportunity to enter the reference room. Little did they know that an cleaner caught sight of her suspicious behavior. Chae-ok hurriedly browsed through the files, in an attempt to find information about Akiko's medical visit. Unexpectedly, the cleaner walked in. Fortunately, Mr. Yoon arrived just in time. However, the cleaner meant no harm. Instead, the cleaner asked if they were Manchurians, and then he made a patriotic gesture. On the other side, the shopkeeper was extremely anxious. He was about to be pricked with a needle by the doctor. Finally, Tae-sang saw Mr. Yoon and his daughter coming out of the reference room. They immediately acted as if they were cured. They repeatedly praised the doctor for his excellent medical skills. The doctor looked bewildered upon hearing the words. "I haven't administered the injection yet. How did you all suddenly recover?" The group was about to leave the hospital, when suddenly, a loud noise rang out. The nurse explained that it was the sound of the military conducting shooting exercises, but the sound clearly came from underground. At the same time, in the underground area of the hospital, the test subjects had transformed into monsters. One of them extended long tentacles and killed a soldier. A young man tried to save his comrade, but he was also caught by the monster. The end of the tentacle opened up, locking onto the young man's head, and draining him completely. The guy wearing glasses showed a gaze in astonishment. He even gave the monster the name, Goddess. The scene shifted back to the main characters. Chae-ok led the group into an empty room, and explained that she had to stay at the hospital tonight, because the cleaner had just informed them that behind the hospital, there was a military-exclusive ward. The basement of that building was highly suspicious. The Korean people who were transferred from the Westgate prison were being held there, and everyone who went in never came out. Furthermore, all the people vanished without a trace. The reason why the cleaner betrayed was his younger brother had been sent there from the prison a year ago, and since then, he had completely disappeared. That's why the cleaner came to work here, to investigate his brother's whereabouts. Chae-ok asked Tae-sang to go back first, to avoid arousing suspicion from the guards. She and her father will stay behind to investigate. Tae-sang was still worried and wanted to follow them, but suddenly, the hospital's alarm went off. The nurse's face changed upon hearing it. She asked Tae-sang and the others to leave immediately. It turns out there was a problem underground. The goddess was almost breaking down the door. The bespectacled guy instructed his subordinates to prepare nitrogen gas. After a large-scale spraying, the goddess finally fainted. Her body activated its self-defense mechanism. It started releasing harmful spores. Soldiers wearing protective suits dragged the goddess into a cage, and following the bespectacled guy's instructions, they took her to the 4th underground level. For a moment, the entire cell was filled with spores. The imprisoned people thought it was snowing. They reached out their hands to catch it, but soon after, their skin touched the spores and started to decay. They clung to the iron bars, screaming in madness, unable to bear the excruciating pain. Fortunately, prudent Akiko intentionally avoided the floating spores. Meanwhile, Chae-ok and the others reached the top floor stealthily. They secretly observed the building behind. That place is heavily guarded and difficult to penetrate. Only the watchtower on the east side is unattended. The cleaner explained that the tower there is unstable. Someone had accidentally fallen to their death there before, so it was completely abandoned. Chae-ok planned to take the risk and give it a try. She was agile, just like a gecko, and she slid down to the lower floor through the pipeline. Chae-ok avoided the patrolling soldiers, while Yoon kept watching upstairs, signaling and guiding her. The father and daughter had perfect understanding, and Chae-ok surreptitiously climbed up the watchtower. From there, she saw the soldiers below busily moving around. The pickup truck was filled with corpses, and the scene of death was extremely gruesome. Tae-sang was uneasy on the other side, and very worried about Chae-ok's safety. Of course, he hadn't forgotten about finding Sakamoto. Tae-sang went to find Ishikawa's informant, and instructed him to go back and report to the boss, to find a painter named Sakamoto, and mention that this person is related to Akiko's disappearance. The next day, news suddenly spread that an unknown infectious disease had broken out in Ongseong Hospital, and it would be closed indefinitely. No one could enter from outside, and no one could come out from inside. This completely unsettled Tae-sang. Just as he was about to leave, he saw the nurse from yesterday, who handed him a note. It said, "Akiko has been found." The nurse was in an extremely unstable emotional state, and she was unsure about Chae-ok's condition. She only knew that many people died last night, and the number was uncountable. Tae-sang didn't understand why the nurse risked her life to pass on the message. In response, she made a gesture of the patriot, conveying everything without words. Tae-sang was still worried about Chae-ok, and decided to personally go to the hospital. But what exactly happened at the hospital last night? Let's go back 6 hours ago. In the prison cells of Ongseong Hospital, there was a mountain of corpses. Soldiers dragged the bodies into the corridors and proceeded to disinfect the area. A major, accompanied by a quarantine team, was escorting the goddess. Unexpectedly, the iron cage got stuck in the elevator. Several people pushed hard to get it inside, but accidentally closed the nitrogen valve. One team member quickly realized the problem as the spores in the air disappeared, indicating that the goddess had awakened. As expected, in the next second, her tentacles pierced through the iron cage. The team immediately fired a counterattack. When the elevator doors opened, only one person stumbled out, but in the next second, he was swept away by the tentacles. The scene inside the elevator was horrifying, with the massive iron doors smashed open, but the goddess was nowhere to be found. The major, with his arms severed, raised his gun and threatened the surviving soldiers to quickly close the elevator. The soldier had no choice but to obey the command. Little did he know, the elevator doors creaked, and in the next second, thick and strong tentacles wrapped around his ankles. The soldier held onto the door frame tightly, refusing to let go. The major pressed his gun against the soldier's head. At this moment, he was still forcing the soldier to close the door. He didn't dare to shoot to avoid attracting the attention of the goddess. So, he fiercely smashed the soldier's face and head with the gun. The soldier, unable to hold on any longer, finally loosened his grip. The major immediately closed the elevator doors. Little did he know, the goddess hadn't spared him. The scene before terrified the major. He raised his handgun and shot randomly. Hastily, he started the elevator to ascend, and by sheer luck, he managed to survive. As for the quarantine team, they all perished. The major had witnessed the power of the goddess firsthand. He wanted to plead with the bespectacled guy to stop the experiment. But at this time, Japan had just experienced a major bombing, and they needed weapons like the goddess. The scene shifts back to the male lead. Although he wanted to go to the hospital to find Chae-ok, it wouldn't be easy to get in. Tae-sang tried to ask Yukiko for help but to no avail. He could only arrange for the shopkeeper to find the hospital's floor plan, and it had to be prepared before 10 p.m. tonight. Because the young nurse asked Tae-sang to signal from the eastern window of Ongseong Hospital at 10 o'clock, saying it was the only chance to rescue Chae-ok. At this moment, Chae-ok was hiding in the cleaner's supply room. Strangely, there was a Japanese soldier with her. What exactly is going on? It turns out that the Japanese soldier was actually a Korean man named Choi. He was studying at the medical school of Imperial University in Seoul, but halfway through his studies, he was conscripted into the military. Due to injuries sustained during the Phonglin battle, he was sent to Ongseong Hospital for treatment. After recovering from his injuries, he stayed behind to carry out quarantine tasks. He was well aware that the spores released last night contained anthrax bacteria, which could be deadly upon contact. When Choi was cleaning the corpses in the prison cells, he encountered the surviving Akiko. Although he wanted to help, his abilities were limited as Koreans were at the bottom of the social hierarchy in Ongseong Hospital. Choi had been subjected to constant oppression, and had his own struggles to deal with. That night, he had initially planned to put an end to it all, but luckily, Chae-ok's compassion saved him. Now, the four of them had created a simple floor plan, and Choi was familiar with the underground cells. He knew that the security there was tight, with a guard stationed every 10 meters, not to mention whether they could rescue Akiko. Even if they managed to get her out of the cell, escaping from the hospital would still be a problem. Therefore, until they received the signal from Tae-sang, the group planned to remain still and wait for the cleaner and Choi to leave. Yoon and his daughter exchanged glances. They had encountered similar underground laboratories in Manchuria. On the other side, Tae-sang received a sketch of a woman through his informant. The sketch was sent by the landlady, and Tae-sang found it strange, so he went to inquire about it. As a result, he learned that the sketch was done by Sakamoto. The landlady had great connections, and she had arranged to meet Sakamoto at the Seihai building at 8 o'clock. Tae-sang arrived half an hour early and waited downstairs. Using Ishikawa's informant's car, of course. Once the landlady appeared, he followed her upstairs. But unfortunately, a group of Japanese people showed up looking for trouble. Tae-sang tried to advise them peacefully, but they wouldn't listen, forcing him to fight back, while the Japanese had too many accomplices. And Tae-sang couldn't break free. He even suffered a cut from a samurai sword, after finally managing to escape their clutches. The private room in the Seihai building was already empty. Tae-sang returned home with a dejected look. It was the first time he had experienced such humiliation. Being oppressed and beaten by the Japanese, in his own country, he instructed the shopkeeper to bring the floor plan. This time, Tae-sang would not back down. Just then, Juntae and the innkeeper appeared. And surprisingly, they brought Sakamoto along. On the other side, Chae-ok couldn't wait for the signal to appear. So she decided to investigate with her father first, if the internal structure here was the same as in Manchuria. The ventilation ducts must be interconnected, allowing direct access from the underground to the top floor, so Chae-ok sneaked into the ducts from the rooftop. While Yoon stayed outside as a lookout, Chae-ok followed the floor plan drawn by Choi, but accidentally entered the experimental specimen room. There, heads of various people were soaking in formalin, including freshly formed fetuses. Chae-ok was horrified and involuntarily took a few steps back. But then a hand grabbed her. She turned around and met several pairs of desperate eyes. As Chae-ok thought about these imprisoned children, she realized they would soon become specimens in glass jars. An indescribable anger welled up in her chest. The little girl desperately pleaded for Chae-ok's help. The female lead glanced at the time and realized it was almost 10 o'clock. But she couldn't ignore the lives at stake, so she sent the people in the iron cage into the vent. Unexpectedly, a person in a white coat arrived at the door. In the next second, he turned on the lights and prepared the reagents, only to discover that the people in the iron cage were gone. He looked around and noticed that the vent was open. He was about to rush out to call for help, but Chae-ok wouldn't give him a chance to leave alive. Meanwhile, Sakamoto arrived at the hospital by rickshaw. He claimed to have bought many essential items, and wanted to enter the hospital directly by carriage. The security guard initially didn't want to let the rickshaw driver in, but Sakamoto insisted that the items were for the director's use. He said that if they intercepted him, they would have to report it to the director. The security guard thought it would be better to avoid unnecessary trouble, and allowed Sakamoto and the rickshaw driver to enter the hospital. Tae-sang, disguised as the rickshaw driver, parked the rickshaw in an empty place, and then revealed the young master, Juntae, from under the carriage canopy. The three of them carried boxes and entered the hospital. On the other side, the shopkeeper and his assistant headed towards the back mountain in a car. The deadline of 10 o'clock was approaching, and the cleaner anxiously looked at his watch. Unfortunate Choi was being punished in the military camp, while Chae-ok swiftly crawled with a few children. When Tae-sang and the others entered the cleaner's supply room, there was no one inside because the signal had not been sent yet. The others were unaware that Tae-sang had already arrived, as if the heavens wanted more excitement. A group of Japanese soldiers stole alcohol from the warehouse, and went to the rooftop to get drunk. Chae-ok, of course, had no knowledge of this. She climbed to the top floor through the vent and tapped on the wall, in an attempt to signal her father. Unfortunately, several Japanese soldiers heard the noise. They quickly grabbed their weapons and rushed over to investigate. Yoon feared that his daughter would be captured, decided to step forward and divert their attention. At this critical moment, suddenly, several fireworks exploded in the sky, captivating everyone's attention. Taking advantage of the distraction, Yoon lunged at the soldiers, and Chae-ok emerged from the vent to help her father. Together, they quickly subdued a group of soldiers. Unexpectedly, a bearded man aimed at Chae-ok from behind, and then a gunshot rang out. Both father and daughter felt a sinking feeling, but it was the bearded man who fell to the ground. Chae-ok saw that it was Tae-sang who had fired the shot, and the tension that had gripped her finally eased. It turned out that when Chae-ok left the cleaner's supply room, she had drawn an arrow on the wall, indicating her intention to go to the rooftop. Fortunately, Tae-sang understood the situation. As for the fireworks, it was the shopkeeper and his companions who set them off. Tae-sang quickly asked about Akiko's whereabouts. However, several unfamiliar children emerged from the vent, leaving Tae-sang completely puzzled about the situation. Meanwhile, the director was in the process of taming the goddess, preparing to replicate Pavlov's dog. At the sound of a bell, he would feed the goddess, hoping that she would recognize him as her master. Tae-sang's side struggled hard to shake off Ishikawa's informant. He planned everything from start to finish, just to save Akiko and preserve the family estate. But Chae-ok couldn't find that geisha at all. Instead, she brought him a bunch of troubles. Tae-sang couldn't rescue so many children. He first sent the children back to the cleaning room. Tae-sang is now preoccupied with legal matters. He completely forgot to introduce Sakamoto to Chae-ok. At this time, the Japanese army had already discovered the body of the white coat. They were ordering a search for the escaped prisoners. Tae-sang, Chae-ok, and Choi didn't dare to delay. They hid the survivors in the cleaning car, and transported them to Sakamoto's room. One child was frightened by the painting, suddenly shouted loudly. Fortunately, the soldier only stood by the door and listened for a while, did not come in to inspect. Tae-sang and Chae-ok walked into the compartment. Only then did they see the walls filled with human and monster drawings. Tae-sang told Chae-ok, "This person is the one you're looking for. He is Sakamoto." Chae-ok immediately took out her mother's portrait. She obtained this clue a year ago, knowing that this painting was done by Sakamoto, so she traced it all the way to Korea. Sakamoto showed a sad expression. Chae-ok's mother is the goddess. Now she has completely become a monster. She is also the only successful experiment in the laboratory. Sakamoto might feel reluctant, so he didn't tell Chae-ok the truth, only saying he doesn't know the whereabouts of this person. Upon hearing this, Chae-ok felt utterly hopeless, and Tae-sang stepped forward to assign tasks. He had the eldest child disguise as a rickshaw man, while the rest hid inside the yellow rickshaw and departed. Tae-sang instructed the eldest child to keep their head down and walk straight ahead, absolutely not stopping or looking around. Tae-sang's car had been modified. It could hide many people inside. The soldier who heard the scream just now quickly went to report to the superior. The latter went with their subordinates to investigate Sakamoto. However, the Japanese soldiers arrived too late. The children had already left in the rickshaw. The guards initially wanted to intercept the rickshaw man, but Yukiko happened to visit the hospital. With a salute from the guards, the rickshaw drove away. The children followed the instructions to seek refuge with Nawaldarek. Meanwhile, Sakamoto and the cleaner, to avoid attention, bid farewell to the main character group one after another. Tae-sang didn't want to involve Mr. Yoon and his daughter, so he let them figure out a way to leave as well. As for Juntae, he followed into the hospital. He already had his own mission. Chae-ok is a bit stubborn. She will definitely fulfill her promise to the employer. Moreover, Tae-sang helped rescue so many children. Chae-ok won't abandon him. Several people plan to re-enter from the rooftop, to continue searching for Akiko's whereabouts. However, young Master Juntae had his own ideas. He saw the Japanese soldiers tied up on the rooftop. He insisted on pulling out his knife and leaving a mark. In this moment of delay, the Japanese soldiers noticed someone on the top floor. They immediately went to investigate, and they saw the bound soldier. There was a piece of white cloth inserted into the body, with "Korean Independence" written on it. Upon seeing this, everyone immediately blew the whistle. The entire hospital went into alert mode. An observant military policeman noticed a ventilation opening nearby, and found traces of someone breaking in, so he followed and crawled inside. On the other side, the hospital director went to meet with Yukiko. He showed great respect to this woman. Yukiko instructed the hospital director to ensure Akiko's safety before the child's birth. She must not die under any circumstances. Upon hearing this, the hospital director sent someone to relocate Akiko. A chubby man was responsible for escorting her. They passed by above where the goddess was being held. The entire hospital was busy capturing the intruders. No one paid attention to the goddess, but the Japanese forgot that the monster wasn't a puppy. The goddess crushes the iron wall with one hand. She sees the location of the elevator. She carefully observes the walls. Sure enough, she finds a lever. On the other side, the chubby man separates Akiko and leaves with his subordinates. They patiently wait for the elevator doors to open. Unexpectedly, a massive shadow emerges. The goddess unexpectedly runs out, and unleashes a crushing slaughter. She indiscriminately attacks any creature within her sight. Tae-sang and the others hear the continuous sound of sirens. They realize they have been exposed. Now they must abandon the rooftop exit. Sakamoto had informed Chae-ok about another passage, located in the laundry room on the second basement floor. There is a chute inside for throwing surgical gowns and cleaning clothes. It's spacious enough for an adult to pass through. They immediately take action. They return to the ventilation duct. Little do they know, the military policeman is following behind. They quickly arrive at the second basement floor. Chae-ok notices that Tae-sang is moving slowly. In fact, Tae-sang's previous injury from the samurai sword has recurred. He has been enduring the pain without saying anything. Just then, he noticed a flashlight behind him. Only then did he realize someone was behind him. Tae-sang quickly placed the barrier back, and jumped into the chute with Chae-ok. However, the military policeman caught up. He confiscated Tae-sang's gun, and kicked him aside. Chae-ok took the opportunity to disarm the military policeman. The group fought in the cramped laundry room. Meanwhile, the goddess was wreaking havoc outside. She grabbed a soldier's head and rubbed it against the iron door. Bodies were flying everywhere. However, the laundry room was not as exhilarating. While Tae-sang was fighting the military policeman, young Master Juntae took advantage of the chaos and escaped. Tae-sang gritted his teeth and held onto the military policeman. They both fell into a pile of dirty laundry. The military policeman held the gun, trying to kill Tae-sang, but Tae-sang resisted with all his might. Then, a gunshot rang out. At this moment, Mr. Yoon and his daughter finally came over to see what was happening. Fortunately, Tae-sang took down the military policeman. However, his wound completely reopened. Chae-ok felt sorry seeing this. She quickly helped Tae-sang bandage his wound. Mr. Yoon suggested that they split up. He would go to the third basement floor to find Akiko. Tae-sang and the others would stay on the second floor to search. They would meet at the designated location after half an hour. If he didn't show up, Tae-sang would leave with Chae-ok first. After Mr. Yoon finished speaking, he pushed the door and left. Meanwhile, the goddess was riding the elevator upwards, continuing to conquer other floors. Coincidentally, she chose the second basement floor. Tae-sang was completely dumbfounded when he saw the creature in front of him. He couldn't help but take a few steps back, staring intently ahead. Amidst the chaos and confusion, underground party, young Master Juntae infiltrated the prison cell, in search of a comrade named Lee In-hyuk. This story is quite long. Young Master Juntae, through his father's connections, learned that the Japanese army would hold a fundraising event in 15 days. All prominent figures would be present. For the Independence Army, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They originally planned to blow up the venue. The only person who knew the location of the explosive stockpile was Lee In-hyuk. He was arrested while printing newspapers. Instead of being sent to a penitentiary, he was captured and taken to the Ongseong hospital. To ensure the upcoming uprising goes smoothly, young Master Juntae must find Lee In-hyuk, and he actually found him. Young Master Juntae knew that rescuing him would be difficult, so he asked Lee In-hyuk to reveal the location of the hidden explosives. Unfortunately, the latter's revolutionary conviction was not strong. If young Master Juntae wouldn't save him, and he wouldn't disclose the location of the explosives. In the midst of all this delay, young Master Juntae was captured by the Japanese army. The situation was even worse for Tae-sang. He hid behind a railing to avoid the monster's attack. Chae-ok slid closer to the body of the military police officer. She picked up a gun from the ground and fired at the goddess, without realizing that the monster in front of her was her own mother, whom she had been searching for 10 years. Just then, the rifle jammed. Tae-sang quickly pulled Chae-ok away to escape. The goddess's flesh automatically healed, pushing out all the bullets and weapons from her body. She chased after Tae-sang closely. Upon hearing the gunshot, Yoon returned to the second floor. Tae-sang and Chae-ok didn't have time to think. They avoided the goddess's attacks. They quickly slipped into a nearby space. Tae-sang gritted his teeth and closed the iron door. The two of them temporarily escaped the danger. Yoon, who caught up, also saw the monster. He used something from his bag to make makeshift explosives. He fired the gun to lure the goddess towards him. The terrifying monster roared at him. Who would have thought these two were once a loving couple? Ignoring the injury on his arm, he suddenly threw the makeshift explosive forward. The flames forced the goddess to retreat. Taking this opportunity, Yoon escaped. Tae-sang and Chae-ok noticed there was no movement outside the door. Before they could escape, they were surrounded by soldiers. The difference in numbers between the two sides was too great. They could only surrender with their hands tied. The goddess escaped this time. It wiped out an entire squad. Most importantly, she can control the elevators. The Japanese side has cut off the power to the elevators and positioned machine gun teams at all exits. The director is furious and his subordinates has brought young Master Juntae in Seoul. Who doesn't recognize the son of the BU gang merchants? But the rules of the outside world don't apply within the Ongseong hospital. The director ordered young Master Juntae to be taken to the laboratory, preparing to extort a hefty sum of money from him. Tae-sang and Chae-ok were taken to the office of the administrator. The administrator only took Tae-sang with him. Choi is among the escort team. Chae-ok was pushed into a prison cell for interrogation. The situation is completely different for Tae-sang. After the Tokyo bombings, the administrator believes that Japan's prospects are bleak. He wants to stay in Seoul with his family, as long as Tae-sang can help him acquire a property and provide resettlement funds. The administrator is willing to show leniency. Tae-sang doesn't easily trust the administrator. The administrator admitted that he noticed Tae-sang hiding in the dark when he was searching Sakamoto earlier. Yet, he left with his subordinates. That should prove my sincerity. Tae-sang expressed willingness to cooperate. You have to tell me where Chae-ok and Akiko are. In the end, the two reached a deal. Tae-sang also asked the administrator for help with 3 things. First, to pass a message to Nawaldarek. Second, to temporarily remove the guards and sentries from their posts. As for the third matter, the director of the episode did not give specific instructions. Immediately after, Tae-sang was thrown into Lee In-hyuk's prison cell. When the guards were distracted by the administrator, he quickly unlocked the door and escaped. The fellow inmate sought his help upon seeing this. Tae-sang handed the key to Lee In-hyuk, and instructed him, "If you trust me, do not make any sudden moves within the next 30 minutes. After saying that, Tae-sang ran towards the corridor. Meanwhile, Mustached Man was infuriated by Chae-ok's attitude. He forcefully opened Chae-ok's clothes, trying to use despicable means to force Chae-ok to confess why she infiltrated the hospital. At a critical moment, the bespectacled guy unexpectedly appeared. He admired Chae-ok's indomitable spirit, and inexplicably felt a sense of familiarity with this woman. The bespectacled guy approached Chae-ok to observe, and was suddenly enlightened. He asked Chae-ok, "What is your mother's name?" Chae-ok, for some unknown reason, blurted out the answer. The bespectacled guy heard that and thought that no wonder she looked so familiar. It turns out she is the goddess's daughter. The bespectacled guy realized that he had found another promising candidate. He then turned and handed Chae-ok a glass of water. On the bespectacled guy's desk was an empty vial of serum. At that moment, Tae-sang quietly approached. He saw the bespectacled guy bringing Chae-ok out, and instructed his subordinates that from now on, no one is allowed to touch this woman. Choi escorted Chae-ok to an isolation room, and secretly handed her a dagger. As for whether Chae-ok drank the glass of water, there was no clear shot. At that moment, she suddenly looked at the wall, and immediately burst into tears. It turned out there was a line of blood-written words on the wall. "I miss you so much, my daughter Chae-ok." Shortly after, Tae-sang arrived. He knocked out 2 soldiers, and found the key to rescue Chae-ok. After learning about her mother, Chae-ok was determined to rescue her. Tae-sang understood Chae-ok's determination, and instructed her to stay alive at all costs. On the other side, Jun-taek, the young master, was injected with an unknown drug. The officer left behind a blank piece of paper and writing utensils, and asked him to confess his accomplices and mission. After speaking, the officer and his subordinates left. Jun-taek's consciousness flickered, and he saw a glass jar on a cabinet, with a young head and a thumb-sized birthmark behind the ear, which matched the features of the cleaner's younger brother perfectly. Jun-taek suffered torment in this place, while the director met his father in the cafe, attempting to secure research funding for the hospital. The wealthy old man, for the sake of his only son in the 3rd generation, could only comply with manipulation. However, the money was delivered to the director's car, but no definite answer was given. As soon as the director's car left, Nawaldarek and the shopkeeper suddenly appeared. They claimed to have a way to rescue Jun-taek. Presumably, this must be related to Tae-sang's message. The scene shifts back to Ongseong Hospital. Jun-taek, who has been pampered all his life, is now on the verge of collapse. He picks up a pen to prepare for confession. On the other side, Tae-sang and Chae-ok head in different directions. One is determined to fulfill a promise, to save the innocent compatriots who are imprisoned, while the other is searching for a lost family member for the past 10 years. Chae-ok returns to the bespectacled guy's presence, and presses him for information about her mother's whereabouts. Meanwhile, as Tae-sang fights his way back to the prison cell, he discovers that all the people inside have disappeared. Suddenly, a loud noise is heard from not far away. Where did the people in the prison go? As it turns out, they didn't stay obediently as agreed. Once Tae-sang left, Lee In-ho opened the prison door, and led everyone to rush out of the prison. However, they were intercepted by soldiers halfway. The soldiers threatened the prisoners to return to the prison, and proceeded to injure them as a warning. The young man didn't want to go back, so he stood up and aimed at the muzzle. After all, death was inevitable, so he preferred to die quickly. Just as the situation was critical, Tae-sang suddenly arrived at the scene, and shot the leading officer in retaliation. He commanded everyone to follow the road and keep going. Unexpectedly, a wounded soldier suddenly stood up, but before he could shoot, the goddess appeared. Tae-sang had witnessed the power of the monster before. He shouted for everyone to run quickly. The young man who lagged behind was caught by the goddess. In the blink of an eye he was no longer breathing. Lee In-ho wanted to seek revenge. But he became scared after crawling out just a few meters. Tae-sang aimed his gun and shot at the goddess. But unfortunately, the damage inflicted was not enough to pose a threat. At that moment, a nearby gas canister rolled over. And Tae-sang saw an opportunity. He deliberately shot to lure the goddess closer. Then seized the chance to smash the gas valve. A white nitrogen gas instantly filled the air, causing the goddess to fall into a state of unconsciousness. White spores emanated from her body. Tae-sang and Lee In-ho quickly retreated. On the other side, Glasses Guy looked at the cup on the table. And the microorganisms inside were still there. Sayu did not drink it as expected. Glasses Guy proudly introduced his invention, and finally revealed the truth to Sayu. The monster in the Wongqing hospital is your mother. The scene shifts to Juntae father, who reports to Mr. Ishikawa. Wongqing hospital is related to the recent series of missing women cases. But the other party claims that the hospital is under military jurisdiction. The police bureau cannot intervene arbitrarily, given the circumstances. Jun's father can only inform Ishikawa. Tae-sang finds Mingzi inside the hospital. After Jun's father finishes speaking, he leaves the mansion, and nods to Aunt Luo who is standing outside as a signal. On the other hand, Tae-sang is reprimanding Lee In-ho, saying that if he had followed the agreement, everyone wouldn't have been injured. This group of patriotic youths brags about righteousness, but they don't even have the courage to face death. Tae-sang angrily scolded Juntae for seeing the wrong person, unaware that the young master has already confessed. The officer, seeing this, throws him a stack of papers, asking the young master to write down the members of the patriotic organization. Meanwhile, Lao Yin finds Tae-sang. Learning that his daughter went to find her mother, Tae-sang hands over the rescued people to Lao Yin, instructing him to enter the underground second floor through the side staircase. At the far end of the second floor, there is an empty ward where they can temporarily take shelter. After Tae-sang finishes his instructions, he prepares to go back and save Sayu. Meanwhile, a soldier reports to Glasses Guy that they have discovered a corpse infected with anthrax downstairs. But when the epidemic prevention team arrives at the scene, the goddess is already gone. Immediately after, Sayu changes into military attire, and, along with Glasses Guy, goes to find the goddess. No matter what, they must kill this monster. Unexpectedly, they are intercepted by 3 military police halfway. The leader of the group requests Glasses Guy's cooperation, as they want to release the remaining nitrogen gas on the underground second floor, to shoot and kill the monster. Because the Japanese army cannot afford any more personnel losses. Little do they know, Glasses Guy states that bullets cannot kill the goddess, and the only way to kill her is through burning with fire. But can you do it? Upon recognizing Sayu, the military police raise their weapons. But since Glasses Guy is in their hands, they hesitate to make any rash moves. Just then, a soldier sneaks up from behind, and knocks down the outnumbered Sayu. Meanwhile, the hospital director receives news of the prisoner's escape. He was about to vent his anger on the administrator, when a soldier comes to report that Ishikawa has requested the hospital's assistance in the police investigation. The hospital director puts his foot on the administrator's head, and urges him to quickly capture the escaped prisoner, and then deal with Ishikawa. Although the director doesn't want to let Ishikawa in, he can't offend the police bureau's reputation, so he can only allow Ishikawa and his subordinates to enter the hospital. Afterwards, the hospital director instructs a soldier to move Mingzi to a more concealed location. After the people at the hospital entrance leave, the shopkeeper disguised as a police bureau driver anxiously checks the time, knowing that this is their last chance to rescue everyone. At that moment, Tae-sang goes to find Mingzi, only to discover that the prison cell is empty. Immediately, a soldier appears, and Tae-sang doesn't have time to engage with him, swiftly taking away the soldier's gun, and locking him up in a cell. Then, Tae-sang proceeds to the stairs ahead. Meanwhile, as Sayu regains consciousness, she realizes she is chained up with iron shackles, and there are dozens of fully armed soldiers across from her. Glasses Guy, who is leading them, wants to conduct an experiment, to see if the goddess can recognize her own daughter. They have already used nitrogen gas to drive the monster toward the elevator, and soon the mother and daughter will meet. Meanwhile, Tae-sang discovers Glasses Guy and the others, standing above the protective net, enjoying the experiment. A bow. noticing Tae-sang hiding in the dark. Intentionally speaks up and asks Glasses Guy, "Are we just going to let the monster kill Sayu like this?" Tae-sang understands that this is the signal from above. Sayu's situation is extremely critical right now, and she hardly has the courage to face this monster. Chae-ok recognized her mother's necklace at a glance. It was only now that she confirmed the bespectacled guy had not lied. Goddess looked at the girl in front of her, recalling the happy times in her memories. The bespectacled guy saw that she didn't attack Chae-ok, and ordered the soldiers to take down the monster. The goddess instinctively protected her daughter. Countless bullets embedded in her flesh. The bespectacled guy ordered the release of nitrogen gas. The goddess swiftly turned around and attacked the soldiers. She forcefully broke the iron chains on Chae-ok's body, want to save her daughter before falling into unconsciousness. Chae-ok couldn't bear to watch her mother get hurt, rushed over to help. In the next second, she was dragged away by Tae-sang. He asked Chae-ok to calm down a little. Tae-sang couldn't say anything in response. The cruelty of the Japanese far exceeds imagination. He could understand Chae-ok's feelings. When Tae-sang was 9 years old, his mother was taken away by soldiers. His mother was a contact person for the righteous army. After being taken away, there was no news of her. Tae-sang has always remembered his mother's last words.
살아. 무슨 일이 있어도 끝까지 살겠다고 애미랑 약속해.
The top priority is to leave the Ongseong hospital first. The bespectacled guy knew that Chae-ok was a big trouble. He ordered that no matter the cost, she must not be allowed to leave the hospital alive. Mustached man immediately ordered his subordinates to conduct a thorough search. They found 2 individuals whose military uniforms had been stripped off. On the other side, Yoon and his men hid in the ward. Mustached man's subordinates quickly searched the vicinity. However, they hesitated due to the fact that TB patients had stayed in this ward. As a result, the searchers were hesitant to proceed. Yoon held a knife and guarded the door. He instantly captured the person who entered. To their surprise, it was Chae-ok, and their group. Soon, the administrator appeared with a Kiko. This is probably the third thing he promised. The administrator knew that after tonight, the director would definitely not spare him. Therefore, he planned to seek refuge with Tae-sang, taking his wife and daughter with him. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper used 2 bottles of liquor to distract the soldiers guarding the gate. Tae-sang glanced at his watch. There were only 10 minutes left until the time he had planned. They had to catch the truck within this deadline. If they waited until exactly 6 o'clock, the Ishikawa's truck would depart.
상관없이 트럭은 제 시간에 출발할 겁니다.
Mustached man has already given orders to close all the entrances and exits of the military hospital building. Tae-sang certainly wouldn't use the main entrance. They tore the bedsheets and twisted them into ropes. They descended one by one through the back window. As Mustached man passed by the corridor, he suddenly stopped. 3 soldiers had just entered for a search. There was no flashlight inside the ward. He sent his subordinates to search. As soon as they opened the door, they saw Chae-ok. In a critical moment, Choi shot and killed the soldier. However, the gunshot disrupted the plan. The gatekeeper soldier instantly became alert. He asked the shopkeeper to quickly move the truck. After hearing the gunshot, Mustached man hurried to the 2nd floor. Tae-sang hurried everyone to speed up. Then they blocked the door with the bed and cupboard. He and Chae-ok guarded the corridor, trying to buy more time for everyone. Choi didn't want to be a coward. He joined the 2 of them. Mustached man's soldiers arrived at the scene and started shooting at the wardrobe. The chaotic gunshots continued to reach the director's office. Ishikawa asked what the hell he was up to. The director said, "If you're curious, get permission from the governor before asking. If that doesn't work, go home and ask your wife." On the other side, Mustached man's soldiers destroyed the cover and then cautiously approached. The next second, they were shot by bullets. The previous spray of gunfire didn't kill Tae-sang and Chae-ok. Only unlucky Choi was hit by a bullet. He probably wouldn't be able to escape and see his mother. Choi handed something to Chae-ok, asking her to help deliver it to his mother. Just as he finished speaking, the boy stopped breathing. Mustached man was suddenly caught by the director's men. They received orders to capture the Koreans alive. Both sides argued about whether to capture them alive. At this moment, Lee In-hyuk came to Tae-sang and said that everyone had already retreated. They were waiting for Tae-sang and Chae-ok.
아래서 봅시다.
Chae-ok and Lee In-hyuk landed one after another. But Tae-sang didn't appear. The next second, the rope was also thrown out of the window. Lee In-hyuk grabbed the impatient Chae-ok and said, Tae-sang has decided to stay and distract the soldiers, until the truck safely leaves the hospital. Upon hearing this, Chae-ok wanted to go back to save people. Lee In-hyuk loudly stopped her. Do you want to endanger everyone else? Chae-ok had no choice but to prioritize the overall situation. The shopkeeper also remembered Naewoldarek's instructions. When the time came, even if Tae-sang didn't come, they had to leave. The shopkeeper started the truck, and followed Ishikawa's convoy out of the hospital. This side had already successfully retreated, while the mustached man on the other side had just finished arguing. Tae-sang remained alone behind the cover, shooting. Unfortunately, his ammunition quickly ran out. Mustached man noticed that the people on the other side were no longer resisting. He quickly led his men over to check. However, the people in the ward had already fled. Even Tae-sang was nowhere to be found. Mustached man saw that the ventilation duct was open. He immediately realized that the person had escaped. At this moment, Tae-sang is crawling inside the ventilation duct. Soldiers also entered one after another to search. A game of cat and mouse officially began. Tae-sang ran into the western end area. He crouched down and quickly moved forward. Inadvertently, he slipped into a cavity. Tae-sang fell unconscious on a pile of bones and didn't wake up. Meanwhile, Naewoldarek handed her precious porcelain to a Japanese woman. After confirming the authenticity of the porcelain, she immediately reported to the hospital's husband. The officer who answered the phone was the one who stopped mustached man and insisted on capturing the Koreans alive. On the other side, the officer finished interrogating young Master Juntaek. He restrained Juntaek's head, and threw him to the designated location. The men of Juntaek's father quickly helped him up. As for Ishikawa's convoy, they stopped halfway. Akiko, who was holding her big belly, got out of the carriage. She pounced into Ishikawa's arms. After setting Akiko down, the shopkeeper drove the truck and left. Ishikawa wouldn't let them go so easily. The shopkeeper noticed a car following them from behind. He immediately turned into a small road to shake off the pursuer. He drove the car into the crowd. Meanwhile, the pursuer's vehicle got blocked by the crowd. It was something Tae-sang had arranged in advance with the landlady. By the time the pursuers intercepted the shopkeeper's truck, the people inside had already moved away. The police bureau didn't give up easily. They arrested the shopkeeper and ordered a search of the entire street. Naewoldarek arranged for the survivors to take rickshaws. They escaped in different directions. On the other side, the hospital director noticed Akiko was missing. He was in a hurry, spinning around and around. However, the bespectacled guy picked up the cup on the table. Surprisingly, the water inside was gone. Only 4 people had been in this office: Chae-ok, Tae-sang, the administrator, and Akiko. Who could have drunk the water with the serum? The next second, the camera focused on Tae-sang. At that moment, he had just regained consciousness from fainting. Then mustached man pointed at the back of his head. Immediately after, several gunshots were heard. It is unknown whether Tae-sang is alive or dead. Chae-ok and her father left in a pedicab. Along the way, flower petals fell. Chae-ok silently prayed for Tae-sang. Yukiko, who was waiting anxiously at home, received a message that her husband wouldn't come home tonight. Ishikawa finally managed to rescue Akiko. How could he possibly go back home? Yukiko summoned the incompetent hospital director. She decided to dismiss him from his position. In order to save his own position as the director, he decided to report the goddess incident. Of course, he concealed the fact that the monster was out of control. He didn't disclose everything. The scene shifted to Tae-sang's side. Mustached man's body lay on the side. Tae-sang tightly held the handgun. It seemed that he had won once again. But one question still lingered in everyone's mind. Who had actually drunk the cup of water? Who would become the next monster? The camera shifted to Akiko's side. A small worm was crawling under her skin. It turned out that Akiko had drunk the cup of water after Tae-sang killed mustached man, the military officer. He crawled into the laundry room through the ventilation duct. He found a clean Japanese military uniform to change into. The hospital director led Yukiko out of the underground second floor. This woman is the daughter of a lieutenant general in the army. She is also the main sponsor of the entire hospital. This visit is definitely to confirm the status of the goddess, based on Yukiko's behavior. She seems to be familiar with Chae-ok's mother before the mutation. The goddess has been agitated since seeing Yukiko. Her subordinates are very concerned about her condition. The bespectacled guy explains the situation. The goddess is not agitated but anxious. She wants to find her own child. Tae-sang sees Yukiko entering the office alone. So he sneaks in quietly with a gun. He threatens Yukiko to find a way to take him out. Holding the gun behind her back, Yukiko dare not disobey and cooperates. Tae-sang successfully gets on her private car and leaves. Unfortunately, he falls into a coma before leaving, due to their past relationship. Yukiko decides not to abandon him at the Ongseong hospital. Instead, she brings him to her own place for treatment. Tae-sang remains unconscious for 4 days. Chae-ok stays at Kim Okdang for 4 days. But Tae-sang doesn't return. Yoon believes that the two of them have already helped find Akiko. It is time to leave Seoul. Chae-ok tells her father that the monster known as the goddess is her mother. Upon hearing this, Yoon is heartbroken. On the other side, all the merchants who assisted Tae-sang have been arrested and taken to the detention center by the police. The shopkeeper is undergoing severe torture. The Japanese military wants to extract information about the escaped prisoners. The shopkeeper faces round after round of torture and doesn't know how much longer he can hold on. Fortunately, Yukiko releases the conscious Tae-sang after learning about the shopkeeper's situation from Nawal Darek. She immediately goes to the police station to rescue him. As a police officer, Ishikawa is too busy to attend to these trivial matters. For the past 3 days, there have been 11 murder cases near Gyeonggi-echeon. The brains of all the victims are missing. The perpetrator is most likely Akiko, who started to mutate upon hearing about the unusual circumstances of the victims. The bespectacled guy specifically came to the police station to confirm. At a glance, he recognized that this was the work of a monster. He deliberately accused Tae-sang, Chae-ok, and Akiko as suspects in the case, as they were the individuals who may have come into contact with the serum that day. Among these 3 individuals, Ishikawa's heart sank upon hearing this. He had already noticed that Akiko was acting strangely these days. The servant who served her died inexplicably, and their dead state was consistent with the bodies found near Gyeonggi-echeon. At that moment, Tae-sang barged in front of the office door. He came as a representative of the Bencho Business Association. He demanded that Ishikawa release the merchants of Bencho Street. Otherwise, starting from today, all the shops on Bencho Street will be closed. As a result, the fundraising party for war funds in 2 days will lose its supply of drinks and food. Ishikawa didn't waste time talking to him. Instead, he asked what secrets Ongseong Hospital had. He also asked where the escaped Koreans were. Tae-sang is a businessman, and if you want to get information from him, you have to pay a price. Ishikawa had no choice but to release the merchants. The shopkeeper saw that Tae-sang was safe, and breathed a sigh of relief. After Nawal Darek settled the injured, she asked Tae-sang to go find Chae-ok quickly, and not keep her worried all the time. When Chae-ok saw Tae-sang, a huge boulder in her heart fell. After going through these few days of hardship together, their feelings for each other had already developed in secret. Ishikawa's little lackey was still monitoring Tae-sang. When he saw this couple reuniting, he unexpectedly felt a sense of relief in his heart. Suddenly, footsteps came from behind the little lackey. He turned his head and found the mutated Akiko. The little lackey quickly pulled out his handgun and fired. But the bullets couldn't take down Akiko, just as it seemed like his head was about to be cut off. Chae-ok and Tae-sang arrived in time. Their appearance at this moment was like getting into trouble voluntarily. The current Akiko was completely different from before. Chae-ok quickly rushed forward and pushed the other person away. Akiko's speed was like that of a wild beast. Even if injured, she would immediately recover, different from the goddess injected with anthrax. Akiko hadn't completely turned into a monster. She still retained her human form. Tae-sang remembered that monsters were afraid of open flames. Therefore, he grabbed a wooden stick ignited by an oil lamp. As expected, Akiko was scared and kept backing away. Tae-sang shouted her name loudly, finally bringing Akiko back to her senses. She looked at herself, covered in blood, and couldn't help but reveal a bewildered expression. Akiko turned and ran out of the alley. The little lackey immediately fired a signal flare to notify Ishikawa. The escaping Akiko was quickly surrounded by the police. To protect the unborn child in her womb, she smashed through a window. She escaped from a nearby shop. Tae-sang and Chae-ok followed the blood trail and chased after her. More and more people from the police station arrived. Chae-ok was afraid that Akiko would meet the same fate as her mother. So, disregarding her own safety, she chased after her. The group ran into the outskirts forest. Desperate Akiko was trapped once again. Ishikawa arrived at the scene in his car. He didn't consider their relationship. He wanted to capture the pregnant Akiko and take her back to the Ongseong hospital. Ishikawa's indifference completely angered her. Akiko lunged forward and tightly choked his neck. She tore Ishikawa's facial skin apart. The surrounding soldiers quickly opened fire upon witnessing the situation. Tae-sang held back Chae-ok, who wanted to rush forward. He signaled her not to act recklessly. Poor Akiko was locked in an iron cage and taken away. Chae-ok, feeling frustrated, returned to her residence. She noticed her father wasn't in the house. There was a letter left on the table. It turned out that Yoon had returned to Ongseong hospital to save his wife. The bespectacled guy learned that he was the husband of the goddess. He directly took him to the presence of the monster. However, Yoon's appearance did not calm the goddess. Would it be enough if they helped her find her child? Yoon was imprisoned in Ongseong hospital. Tae-sang couldn't just leave it be. He put the lucky gemstone bracelet on Chae-ok's hand. They made a pact that if one of them died first, the other would remember them for a lifetime. On the other side, the director is doing everything possible to save Ishikawa, whose carotid artery is injured. It's probably difficult to survive tonight. After hearing the news, Yukiko was very indifferent. She and Ishikawa were originally in a political marriage. Yukiko doesn't care about his life or death. The person she admires in her heart is actually Tae-sang. At this moment, Yukiko searched through the photo album. She saw a photo of herself with the goddess. What is the connection between these two people? The director of the episode didn't mention it for now. After seeing Yukiko's attitude, the director gave up on saving Ishikawa directly. The next day, Yukiko held a funeral for her husband. Tae-sang read about Ishikawa's death in the newspaper. The entire article distorted the truth. It claimed that he died at the hands of a Korean serial killer. The Japanese military would undoubtedly seize this opportunity to make a big fuss. They would take advantage of it to oppress the Koreans. Tae-sang had a preliminary plan in his mind. He first contacted Lee In-hyuk through Juntaek. He informed him that the activities at Fumin House had been cancelled. Tae-sang wanted the bomb in his possession, to blow up Ongseong Hospital in one fell swoop. Chae-ok came to the funeral with Tae-sang on her back. She took advantage of the chaos and assassinated the director of Ongseong Hospital. When the soldiers saw their commander die tragically, they immediately knocked down Chae-ok. The goddess seemed to sense that her daughter was in trouble. She broke through the prison door directly. The soldiers quickly went to report the bespectacled guy that the goddess was missing. To lure out the monster, the bespectacled guy released Yoon. Unexpectedly, he pretended to be unconscious and knocked out several Japanese soldiers. Upon hearing that Chae-ok was in trouble, Tae-sang hurriedly rushed to the scene. Little Lackey pulled him aside and informed him that Chae-ok was missing. The police station also issued an order to search Kim Ok-dang. Little Lackey only knew this information, and considered it as a repayment for Tae-sang saving his life. The shopkeeper was awakened by the noise of the search, and was about to get up to check. He discovered that Park Gun was making a phone call in Japanese. It turned out that Park Gun was Yukiko's spy planted in Kim Ok-dang. Chae-ok regained consciousness from coma, and realized that she was trapped in Yukiko's territory. Meanwhile, Yukiko arrived at Kim Ok-dang and lied to Tae-sang that Chae-ok was dead. She urged him to return to his previous indifferent self in order to protect Kim Ok-dang. Tae-sang refused to believe that Chae-ok was dead, and his anxious appearance seemed ironic to Yukiko. Yukiko absolutely wouldn't allow Tae-sang to be with Chae-ok, but Tae-sang threatened her, and vowed to use any means necessary to find Chae-ok. Yukiko retorted, asking if he was capable enough. She pointed out that he didn't even know who the people around him truly were, not to mention Park Gun, who betrayed Kim Ok-dang. Even Nawal Darek was the person who betrayed Tae-sang's mother back then. She couldn't withstand torture and revealed the address of the organization's contact, which led to the tragic death of Tae-sang's mother. The shopkeeper had already revealed the information that the Japanese military wanted before Tae-sang rushed to the police station. Juntaek talked about national righteousness, but in the hands of the Japanese military, he betrayed his comrades and friends in less than half a day. This is the despicable nature of a weak person. Yukiko questioned Tae-sang, "Do you want to confront me with this group of trash?" Although Tae-sang was saddened, he was not swayed by Yukiko's words. If it weren't for the Japanese invasion of Korea, none of us would have encountered this situation, let alone betray our compatriots under torture, and live with a lifelong sense of guilt. Yukiko knew that the friendship between them had come to an end. The shopkeeper was moved by Tae-sang's words, and vowed to find clues about Chae-ok, unaware that Chae-ok had already been sent back to Ongseong Hospital by Yukiko. The goddess sensed her daughter and appeared immediately. At a critical moment, Park Gun's conscience kicked in, and he disclosed Chae-ok's whereabouts to Tae-sang. After all, he had promised to be Yukiko's informant, because Yukiko had guaranteed not to harm Tae-sang. Park Gun had never considered betraying Kim Ok-dang. Tae-sang prepared to return to the hospital with all the bombs. At this moment, the goddess broke through the barrier and launched a massive attack on the surrounding Japanese soldiers. The bespectacled guy quickly took Chae-ok hostage, threatening the goddess to stay still. The monster indeed stood motionless, standing in place and enduring the soldiers' gunfire. On the other side, Tae-sang used the bombs, successfully climbed over the hospital wall. He skillfully entered the ventilation duct from the rooftop. Tae-sang took out the bombs from his bag and set them up. Unexpectedly encountering Yoon, Tae-sang informed him about Chae-ok's capture, then handed him 2 boat tickets, urging him to leave immediately after finding Chae-ok, and leaving the rest to Tae-sang. Meanwhile, the bespectacled guy held Chae-ok captive, led the goddess to the front gate, and then began spraying a large amount of nitrogen gas. The goddess was trapped at the intersection of the second level. Second area. Tae-sang heard the soldiers talking, and learned that the bespectacled guy was taking Chae-ok to the emergency exit on the east side. Yoon caught Tae-sang, who was preparing to take action, and asked him to take Chae-ok and leave. Yoon wanted to stay behind with his wife, and be destroyed together with Ongseong Hospital. He instructed Tae-sang to take good care of Chae-ok, and get the military gasoline from the warehouse, and start placing bombs in various locations in the pipes. Tae-sang headed towards the emergency exit. He shot and killed the soldiers who was escorting Chae-ok. The bespectacled guy took advantage of the chaos, and ran back to the office to get the remaining serum, fearing that the goddess would destroy his research results. Just as the bespectacled guy was planning to escape, he suddenly heard Akiko's cries for help. He almost forgot about this pregnant experimental subject. On the other side, Yoon finished setting up the bombs, and the fuse was about to burn out. He tapped on the wall to deliberately draw out the goddess, and then slowly walked towards his wife. But the monster didn't recognize his former lover. The next second, a huge explosion sound erupted, and the entire hospital was engulfed in flames. Tae-sang prepared to take Chae-ok and leave during the chaos, but Chae-ok insisted on going back to find her parents. Tae-sang revealed Yoon's prepared sacrifice. At this moment, Sakamoto suddenly appeared. He led the two of them to the training ground, urging them to quickly leave through the back door, as news of the Ongseong Hospital explosion had already spread. To facilitate the firefighters' efforts, the back door of the training ground was left open. Tae-sang drove away with Chae-ok, unaware that the goddess was not dead. Nawal Darek received the news of Tae-sang's escape, and immediately packed cash and gold bars for Park Gun to deliver. Both sides gathered at the designated meeting point. Just as Tae-sang and Chae-ok were about to successfully escape, an unknown convoy caught up with them. It turned out to be Yukiko appearing with a group of swordsmen. Seeing Tae-sang's persistence, she ordered her subordinates to take action. After Yukiko finished speaking, she got in a car and left the scene. The swordsmen quickly rushed towards Tae-sang and Chae-ok. They were well trained with excellent swordsmanship. Tae-sang and Chae-ok were pushed back, losing ground. Both of them were severely injured but persisted in resisting. As Chae-ok was reaching her limit, the goddess unexpectedly caught up. Her tentacles pierced through the swordsmen's chests. The tide of battle instantly turned. The goddess let out a furious roar. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tae-sang helped Chae-ok to her feet. The swordsman joined forces to sever one of the goddess's arms, and in retaliation, she angrily slammed them into a stone pillar. By now, she was filled with rage. She swiftly pursued Tae-sang. Chae-ok didn't have time to think and stood between them. The goddess's tentacles pierced through her daughter's body. Tae-sang rushed over to check Chae-ok's condition. Unfortunately, she couldn't hold on for much longer and stopped breathing. In such chaotic times, it's difficult to seek a happy ending. On the other side, inside Ongseong Hospital, the bespectacled guy saved Akiko's unborn child. He had a feeling that this child would change everything. Soon after, the funeral for Ishikawa was held. Yukiko suddenly received a letter from Tae-sang. The note only had one sentence: farewell. Yukiko looked around suspiciously. Sure enough, she saw people from Kim Ok-dang, and the names on the funeral wreaths were all Koreans who died in the Ongseong Hospital incident. Yukiko immediately realized something was wrong. The next second, the bomb planted in the hall exploded. Almost all the key figures stationed in Korea lost their lives. Spring in Seoul ended quickly this year. Japan soon announced surrender and withdrawal. Republic of Korea regained independence. The Japanese stationed here gradually returned to their homeland. The bespectacled guy poured a glass of water next to Yukiko. This woman had half of her face destroyed by the explosion. For her, the water given by the bespectacled guy was an opportunity. If she drank it, she would become a mutant. The bespectacled guy left the choice to Yukiko and left. The woman stared at the table for a long time. She didn't make a clear move. As for Tae-sang, he continued praying for a miracle, hoping that there was still a turning point in the matter. Perhaps God heard his plea. In a quiet sea area, the goddess surrounded Chae-ok with her tentacles. A mutated worm crawled out of her body, and slowly swam into Chae-ok's mouth. The next second, Chae-ok opened her eyes. This season's story ends here. It's predictable from the beginning to guess the outcome. However, the scenes depicting the atrocities of the Japanese army were well done, perhaps due to the similar historical background. So we can feel the same emotion toward the plot while watching. Although the story is somewhat cliché, its production is excellent. If we disregard the monster theme, it's not as exciting as domestic espionage films. Fortunately, Korea is truly skilled at making monster-themed works, and can attract a considerable audience with this genre.